Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Shadow Tech Goddess, Part 3, Chapter 6, the Shadow Tech Goddess. And I've been wondering all day how I'm going to attack this particular chapter. This is probably one of the more important chapters in all my books, because of what has to be conveyed to the reader, what concepts have to be fleshed out and made plain without coming out and telling the reader what's happening. We show, we don't tell here, okay? Disney, you got that? We show, we don't tell, and that's it. And just hope that the audience is paying attention and that it comes across the way the author, which in this case is me, intended. There's a lot of concepts to absorb and a lot of revelations to be observed. And if I don't read this correctly, I'm gonna come off sounding like a freaking idiot. Perhaps I already do. But this will confirm that if I don't do it just right. Last week, we had a horrendous battle in the Shrine of Boraster. The K-Lister crew of the George Parr turned on the Lacerta as she was planning on running off with Paymaster Stenstrom to use as her personal punching bag and sex toy. They get a lot of extra pay if she ends up dead, so they sneak a Zaffin Hemolizer on her neck. Harkin, I've used that device before, and it sucks. It was doing a number on her, but while it was doing a number on her, she was doing a number on them. Lots of fighting, lots of killing. Paymaster Stenstrom manages to get crewman Lessa out of there into safety, puts her on the rip card, and he's like, well, I gotta turn the freaky deaky knob on the anatometer. I've turned it once, I have to turn it 7 more times. So he puts her in the rip car, says wait here, goes back in to turn the knob, but wow, the knob is gone. What the fuck? It's gone. And the Lacerta is just laying there on the verge of death, and he decides, she fought like a warrior, she deserves to die a better death than being drained of blood by this Hemolizer. So he takes it off of her, and then she tells him in a delirious fashion how she's got this fortress that she took from a Zaffin warlord, and in the courtyard of this fortress is this horrific pit, and she's planning on putting him in this pit and using him as her personal plaything that she can have sex with and fight with whenever she wants, and even display to her friends. And it sounds truly horrific. He gets the Hemolizer off her neck. She tries one last time to stab him with some knockout stuff. It didn't work, and then she falls apparently lifeless. He tries to turn the knob is gone. The Hall of Mirrors returns, beckoning him to enter because the Shadow Tech Goddess and Duval and the knob are all in there. So he steals himself and heads in, and that's where we leave off. So my quest to provide you with quality content and entertainment, completely unmonetized, begins. And let's see if I can pull this off. Am I an idiot or am I a genius? You will be the judge. So let's proceed immediately. Stenstrom plunged into the musty darkness. The floor was littered with debris, and the air heavy from wet stone. He couldn't see, just like in the old culvert back home, burgeoning with gothic darkness, and the floating round eye of his mother's flaming cigarette. An ebon tunnel that could be home to any number of imagined horrors stretched out before him, though in this case, a real horror awaited him at the end. The Shadow Tech Goddess. His mega eye was gone, probably lost in the bloody fight with the K-Listers. No, wait. Gwen had it. She was always grabbing, always taking it. A very annoying habit. And where was Gwen? He had to comfort himself with the fact that she could take care of herself and was probably safe somewhere at the bottom of the monolith. He held his ints at the ready, but they shook a little in his hands. He hated the dark, and he was tired of inhabiting dark places and wondering what lurked just out of sight. He craved the sunshine and the occasional stormy skies of his home in Tyrol by the sea. Sashing one of his weapons, he shook up a yellow holystone, but it didn't do much to cut through the dark. He cocked hammer and fired a glowing green inch shot down the corridor. The globe lit up the walls of the corridor with an emerald green ring that drifted for a long distance before sputtering out. He didn't see Duval, and he didn't see the Shadow Tech goddess in the green light. He appeared to be alone. He continued on, feeling his way along the left-hand wall, feeling the accumulated grit and sediment pass under his fingers. Every so often he encountered a drafty, empty spot. In the dim light of the Holy Stone, he saw small rooms with no doors situated along the corridor, about one every 50 feet. They were about the size of a broom closet. These were the nodes of reality, he recalled Aram saying. Both good and bad things are supposed to come out of them. This one seemed empty. The next one down sputtered faint orange light. Ints ready, he entered. Something in the room took up most of the space. There was a table, slightly slanted, made of sterile metal. A female lay atop the table, and she seemed to be in distress. Her arms and feet were shackled, her neck slightly arched in anguished. Leaning in, he gasped. It was Queen Wendell Knight. He remembered her beautiful face from her visit in his office where she presented him with the anatometer. Her words came back to him, exactly how I remembered it when you came to rescue me. And what had Hannah Ben Sherlamp said?
A demon is said to live there, and there is also the persistent story of a trapped woman, a goddess, requiring rescue. A fanciful story that has survived the centuries.
He tried to free her, but she was rigid like a statue. Time seemed to stand still around her. She might have been here chained to this table for untold ages. And another thing, she was missing the left side of her body. It had been replaced with robotic parts of extreme complexity. He marveled at it in horror. Shaking up a marzible, he slid it into her hand so that he could relocate her later. My queen, I will return for you. Stenstrom turned to leave, to resolve the matter with Duval and the Shadow Tech goddess, and then rescue Queen Wendell Knight. He bumped into a tall statue that hadn't been there before, blocking his exit from the node. It was a statue of Queen Wendell Knight and... Wait, the statue looked like Queen Wendell Knight, but it carried a completely different feel. Wendell Knight was angelic. This statue seemed quite the opposite. He sensed evil and chaos leaking out of it. Her expression was diabolic, her eyes wide, and here her flesh side was located on the left, the robotic parts on the right. The robotic parts were sadistic, studded with wire and knives. He tried to push the statue aside or topple it over, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked in time. There is a woman requiring rescue, and there is a demon haunting the shrine. Both two opposite halves of Queen Wendell Knight. He squeezed past it and re-entered the corridor. Far down the corridor, Stenstrom made out a distant smudge of indistinct light hovering before him. It was so dim he couldn't really see it when looking at it straight on. When he looked to the side, the smudge popped out of the dark like a blue halo, reminding him of the old witch lights glowing on moonless nights on Marion Hill he and his sisters could see from their bedrooms. They never had discovered the source of those lights. Step by step he continued on. Gwen needed him, the terrified crewman whose name he didn't know needed him. And apparently, Queen Wendell Knight needed him too. He passed another node, and this time he thought he saw someone sitting within. Shining his holy stone, he peeked in, nth ready. There was a pile of clothes jumbled together in a rough sitting shape. He found a fleet coat over a white shirt and a pair of black pants, a gun belt with Mim's pistol loaded, a large hat, and a blue wig. Were these Lieutenant Rem Deckard's clothes and her officer's gun? If so, where was she? It was as if she had simply vanished, leaving her clothes behind in the rough arrangement of how she'd worn them. Deckard herself was nowhere to be found. He exited the node and continued, still seeing the blue witchlight in the distance. A face appeared on the wall in the dim glow of his holy stone, causing Stenstrom to jump back a bit. It was a somber woman's face drawn in chalk with an elaborate cartouche looming high into the upper reaches towards the ceiling. Cat, the Black Hat, had told him once that the face of the Shadowtech goddess was hidden somewhere in the Hall of Possibilities. Was this the face of the Shadowtech goddess? It was a woman with blue eyes and a slightly squared-off chin. She had strong cheekbones, wide, thin lips, a small nose, and a massive shadow mark that nearly covered the entire right side of her face. She had whitish blonde hair that seemed to be cut short, in a fashion his mother once favored. Her face in chalk was expressionless. Stenstrom tried to compare the image in chalk with the woman of his dreams who claimed to be the Shadowtech goddess. Their complexion seems to be a similar shade. The one from his dreams had worn a helmet covering all except her nose, mouth, and chin, so that was all he had to go on. He gazed at the portrait. They were similar, though the one depicted here seemed to be slightly more squared off in the face. It was difficult to tell. She had a rather unassuming, unremarkable face. She lacked the wry smile and energetic feel of the one from his dream, whom he imagined would be stunningly beautiful under her helmet. She had a rather large shadow mark, but many ladies, jealous of the growing popularity of black hats in the league, were painting shadow marks on their faces these days, some being quite large, like hers. This woman could literally be anybody. Pass her in the street, and one wouldn't think twice. Yet here she was, the face of the destroyer, mirthlessly staring down at him, and possibly waiting for him at the end of this corridor. With her chalk eyes seeming to follow him, he backed away and continued. The dim blue smudge got ever closer. Now he could see it clearly, whitish blue, like a patch of drifting moonlight. He dropped his holding stone. It wasn't helping. At last, the corridor ended in an archway. Beyond the archway lay an ornate Gothic room bathed in soft blue light that seemed to come from everywhere. There was a clean, checkered black and white tile floor and lacy iron furnishings and accents laid out in a tasteful manner. Great windows looked out on swirling pitch black. It looked like the parlor of some grand manor, with the exception that everything was made of iron. Iron picture frames holding nothing hung on the walls, and iron vases sported arrangements of iron flowers riveted together. A grand iron staircase was situated in the center of the room, twisting upward beyond his field of view. He heard the subtle notes of crying within. Stenstrom, pistols drawn, entered. Sitting at the top of the stairs in a vast chair was the Shadowtech goddess. She wore tattered black clothing through which glimpses of chalky white skin peeked through. Her face was obscured by her featureless conical helmet. Resting in her arms like a sleeping baby was Duval, head facing upwards, mouth open. The Shadowtech goddess held him, rocking back and forth slightly. She wept. Other than the fitful sounds of her crying, the room was unearthly quiet. He moved to the steps and looked up. She seemed to take no notice. Duval was limp in her arms. You stole my anatometer. You forced me here across the deep sea, far from the fields I know. Here I am. What do you want with me? Nothing. No response. You killed my countess. She stopped weeping, and her helmet moved slightly. She was staring at him. Can you come to me? She asked in a muffled voice. I required the knob to the anatometer. Then come. Stenstrom was certainly not at ease in the room with the Shadowtech goddess, but he also felt none of the crushing fear he'd felt in the shrine. He eased up the stairs, ince raised, the two figures waiting at the top. Soon he stood over them. The helmet tilted up as she glanced at him. "He's dead," came her muffled voice. "Give me the knob." "I can't let him go." Stenstrom sashed one of his ints and removed the helmet from her head, then let it fall to the iron platform with a noisy clatter. He was shocked by what he saw. He nearly fell off the platform. "Morgan?" Sitting there was Morgan Jetterix, the woman he'd watched fall from the George Parr, the woman he'd grieved over and built a cairn of stone, a woman he loved. She was dirty and her braided hair was a mess. She bore a somewhat crazed expression, but she seemed otherwise uninjured. Her complexion, unlike her usual tan self, was deathly pale, like a monoma, her eyes round and lamp-like. She wore her hospitaller bodysuit, though it was filthy and torn, her flesh showing through in various spots. Her hair was ragged, the braids coming out in a hopeless tangle. Her blonde hair was a tepid green shade, and her hands were tipped with ragged greenish claws. Morgan, what happened? I saw you fall from the ship. I held your dead body. I wept over it. I buried it." Her lamp-like eyes gazed at him, full of sorrow. "I know you did. I listened to you." "You are dead, Morgan." She shook her head and spoke in a heavy voice. "I can't die, Belle. I can't die, Belle." The room closed in on him. The words the Shadowtech goddess had spoken in the Garden of Horrors returned. "Beware the Tempest Vindal, a creature that is virtually immortal and will lead you to ruin. The Tempest Vindal." "Morgan? Are you a Tempest Vindal? Morgan?" She closed her eyes. "I really don't know what I am, Belle. I've heard that name. I've read it in arcane books, pulled from the shelves of forgotten libraries. I've looked at old drawings and pictures, seen a monster there on the page, a parasite. Can that be me? As a hospitaller, if I were to diagnose myself, what else could I be? I have all the symptoms. The evidence seems clear." Things fell into place. Things finally made sense. "Morgan, was that you I encountered in Clovis? Did you steal the anatometer? Did you kill my countess?" Morgan seemed desperate for a moment. "No, yes, I... Did you steal the anatometer?" "Yes, I did. I can go wherever I want, sometimes." "And did you kill my countess?" No, I didn't kill anybody there. You do believe me, don't you?" "The Tempest Vindal tells lies, and you will believe every word. Why did you come at me like that? Why the fear? Why do you look like this?" "I don't know." He took her by the scruff of the neck and dragged her out of the chair. Duval's body tumbled to the ground. Keeping his grip, he pulled her down the stairs. As in the Garden of Horror, things in the Shadowtech goddess's sanctum came to life around him. The iron was replaced with wood, soft fabric, and fresh flowers. The picture frames filled in with vibrant color. Morgan groveled at his feet. "I love you. You know I couldn't hurt you." "You mean like at Sir Fortnum College? Was that you coming at me off the slab like a corpse?" "I don't know, Belle. Sometimes I'm not myself. Sometimes something comes over me and I can't help it. I'm sorry." "And what about at the vent when you tried to stop Gwen's heart?" I didn't mean for that to happen. I was just trying to scare her away." He shook his hand and produced the stone knife. "And what about Duval? Did you tell him the same things? Did you proffer innocence? And now there he is, dead? You killed him, right?" Morgan wept and spoke in sobs. I didn't kill him. I swear it. I wanted to give him what he wanted most. The Shadow Tech Goddess. I wanted to bring him to her. That's what this is all about. That's why I stole the antimatter, to come here so I could take him to her. I saw her here once, long ago. He put the stone knife to her throat. Then you better start talking. It better be the truth. Morgan looked at the knife. Her eyes darted. She put her hand in her mouth and chewed her nails. Her nails were green and ruined. She tried to compose herself. This knife, the stone it's made of, do you know where it comes from? It's masonry from my manor home in the Green Hallowlands. I've told you of the fire that happened there. How my father saved me. I never told you when that fire happened. Belle, it happened a long time ago. If you were to visit my home in Hala today, you'd just find a pile of blackened stones in a forgotten, overgrown field, just like what you'd find at Caroline. Only no one goes there to find love. No one has lived there in centuries. The locals, they think it's cursed. I was told you are an extraplanar creature of a particularly dangerous note, and that I should kill you with this knife right now. Morgan was desperate. She wanted to embrace him, but he kept her away with the knife. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to survive. Soon after the fire, I fell into depression, madness. I was committed to a convent to live out my days. I felt so utterly alone. None of my Volgrim selves survived the fire. They all perished. Only I lived. And I felt the weight of that. It's a feeling I wouldn't wish on anybody, Belle. In the convent, I became aware for the first time of a presence that I was drawn to. I didn't understand. I couldn't explain it. It was like a bouquet of flowers that I longed to hold and breathe in deep. It was all I wanted. My every moment was set to it and present in that convent. I became like a raging beast, and I saw myself as a monster for the first time reflected in the window. I made that convent tremble with fear, and with my own hands I broke out and began chasing that bouquet of flowers I had longed so much to touch. I went on a long journey, not simply across Cana, but across the plains as well. I could go to whatever universe I wished, though I didn't understand it fully for a long time. And did you find your bouquet of flowers? I did. In Hanover, by the icy bay, not the Hanover we know, a different one, universes away. It was a young man, a student. I longed for him, and I worked my way into his graces. Morgan's eyes grew distant. I think I might have murdered somebody, perhaps his lover or other hangers-on in my way. I don't remember. And then we married, and I was so happy to hold him close. It filled me with power. I could smile and laugh again. I could smile and laugh again. Morgan blinked in sadness. But it didn't last. Like a bouquet of flowers, he wilted and became nothing. Nothing. It was as if the universe had turned its back on him, and I too. I felt the calling of a new bouquet elsewhere that I longed to hold, and I left him behind. I walked the plains, searching once again. I've made that search many times. I've had many husbands. I've had many wives. All just fleeting moments in the sun. All the lies I've told, all the people I've pretended to be, the names I've called myself. And then Captain Duval. You got to him and became his first officer. Morgan nodded. And then you killed him. She fell apart, erupted in emotion. No, I didn't. Yes, I pursued him decades ago, and yes, I killed his wife and then I latched myself to him. I loved him. I let him do to me whatever he wanted. All the while I was seeking out my next target. I'm old enough to know how to stalk, how to put myself in the correct position to encounter my next love. So I placed myself aboard Gwen's scouting ship and I waited. I forgot what I am during that time. I thought I was just a mortal woman again. It happens a lot until I wake up. She looked up at Duval's body at the top of the stairs. And then I saw you, Belle, in the Kestrel's pit. And I fell in love all over again. For the first time in ages, I actually felt like I was in love, and not simply satisfying a need. I wanted it to be different this time, I swear it. I wanted you to love me too. I realized what I had done to Duval. I watched him go mad, watched him become a merciless tyrant. Morgan's voice cracked with sadness and she wept uncontrollably. I wanted to give him back something of what I stole. He was a great man once and a kind man. He could walk the plains just like I could in his St. Mary's accent. He had a wife and children, and I took it from him. He went mad because of me. They all did. And for once, I didn't want to turn my back and move on. I wanted to show you that I still have feelings. And I wanted to make things as right as I could. I listened to him plot and rave about the Shadowtech goddess. I wanted to give him what he wanted. I wanted to bring him here and lead him to her. I wanted him to be happy again. And do you know what we found here in this room? Nothing. No Shadowtech goddess. Just this empty helmet sitting atop the stairs. I revealed myself to him, and Duval was devastated that she wasn't here. He couldn't bear it, and what was left of his mind gave way. And I gave him peace. I didn't want him to suffer. She turned to Stenstrom at the end of his knife, her eyes puffy and desperate. Do you believe me? Don't you, Belle? I'm told you tell lies. Yes, I tell lies. And sometimes I tell the truth as well. I don't want to be a monster. Belle, I don't want to hurt anybody. Her face cringed in anguish. I'm just a woman who survived a fire. And look what happened to me. I don't want to be a deceiver. Morgan Jedricks of the House of Thompson will not be the deceiver of the man she loves. Is Morgan Jedricks your actual name? Yes it is. The name I was born with long ago. I want you to know my name. She held up her clawed hands. Look at me. The only way I can be young and beautiful again is to take from you or Duval. I'm not safe. I tell lies. I go mad and then I'm okay for a while. Perhaps it's best if you just kill me. Take the knife made from the stones of my old manor and do it. I've lived too long and caused too much sorrow. She smiled. I'm glad yours is the hand, Belle. He stood there with the knife for what seemed like a long time. Eventually, he lowered the blade and sat next to her. His hand found its way into hers. Her head eventually came to rest on his shoulder. The Shadowtech goddess had told him he would believe the Tempest Findal's lies. Whether he believed everything she said was irrelevant. He couldn't harm Morgan. He took the stone knife and shattered it. So what are we gonna do, Morgan? I can't kill you. I don't know, Belle. What can we do? I can't kill you either. He noticed the Shadowtech goddess's helmet lying forgotten on the floor. The previously empty pictures on the wall now moved with livid color. He watched the scenes unfold for a minute and was struck with clarity and inspiration. He picked up the Shadow Tech Goddess's helmet. This helmet, Morgan, it's a cause for celebration. Look! In one of the portraits on the Shadow Tech Goddess's wall, a charming scene unfolded. A tall, blonde-headed woman in a gown with a large shadow mark on her face walked in a leafy grove carrying a basket. Children walked with her, and a handsome man as well. They sat down in a lovely spot and enjoyed a simple lunch together. See, there she is. The Shadow Tech Goddess, look at her. Family and children, an afternoon in the sun. Those simple things are all the weapons that were ever necessary to prevent the coming of the Shadow Tech Goddess. She's not here in this forlorn room because she's out there living her life. Even she, a destroyer of universes and the stuff of nightmares, isn't locked into a fate, isn't consigned to a particular damnation. In this universe, and perhaps many more, even the Shadow Tech Goddess has a place she calls her own, contenting herself with being a simple wife and mother. Morgan took the helmet and gripped it hard, her knuckles standing out. I see. And if she can have that, then why can't I? Why can't I, Belle? He recalled more words the woman in his dreams had spoken to him. The anatometer will turn you into a new man. Come, let us create a place just for you, Morgan. And there, together, we'll figure out a way to help you make a place all your own. Morgan stood and brushed herself off, bouncing with life and hope. She went up to the top of the stairs and placed Duval in the chair. She said a few words of goodbye to him and returned and took his hand. No Shadow Tech Goddess. She's not there. She doesn't exist on this plane, at least not in that particular form, unaware of the fate that could have befallen her. The love he felt for Morgan Jetterix had never been greater. He'd witnessed what he thought was Gwen's death in Caroline, and his love for her was confirmed, and he saw Morgan's apparent death, and the same was true. The Tempest Findal will tell you lies, and you will believe them. It will make you feel sorry for it. But what did it matter? If this adventure had taught him anything, it was that he had the capacity to love many times over, even the Tempest Findal and the lies she might be telling. Perhaps that was the best gift the universe had given him. She approached and put her arms around him. She parted her lips and kissed him. He felt the passion, the burning of it, and the transfer of energy from his soul to hers. He controlled it, giving Morgan just what she needed, and when they parted, she looked like herself again, tan, tattooed, with no trace of green tangles and green claws. Morgan took a last look at Captain Duval, and they went back out into the corridor, hand in hand, past the Shadow Tech Goddess's portrait. They passed the node where Queen Wendell Knight was imprisoned. Don't worry about her, Morgan said. A different version of you saves her. Stenstrom peered into the node. It appeared to be empty. Morgan pulled him along. Her eyes grew wide with excitement as the shrine approached. And with that, we conclude Part 3, Chapter 6, The Shadow Tech Goddess. So, what's the verdict? Am I a total fool? Or am I not a fool? I like the old switcho changeo. I think I've mentioned that before. It shouldn't be a secret. I build up the Shadow Tech Goddess, and then I give you something different. Anybody can have a big, scary, demonic creature in a lair and have a big battle. In this case, I wanted it to be a different sort of journey, one that was fulfilling in different ways. The Shadow Tech Goddess is a character that frequents my books, especially if you're aware of the earlier books in the League of Elder series. She's a common character. I don't say her name in the book, and I'm not gonna say it now. It should have been obvious that this character had something different about her, how she was mad at first, and then once she got control of her shadow tech powers, once she met her future husband and she had children, it's like a new life opened up to her. In every universe is this same character, and she is potentially the destroyer of that universe, the shadow tech goddess. That room at the end of the Hall of Possibilities is her room. It's where she could be if the Black Hats were successful in capturing her, if she was dragged off to Shade Church and made to feel suffering and torment. Then she would have become the shadow tech goddess. She would have risen in power and then occupied that throne in the middle of nowhere, and maybe returned to the field she knows to destroy them. But if in fact she gets to live a more sedate life, one that she is perfectly happy and content with, she doesn't have great needs or wants, just to be a part of a loving family, a loving wife, a mother is all she needs, and there will be no shadow tech goddess. And that's what Stenstrom saw in the Iron picture. He saw the shadow tech goddess, or the woman who could have been the shadow tech goddess, on an outing with her family, unaware of the fate that could have befallen her. So instead of giving you this big creepy entity, which is sort of in a Lovecraftian sense, a character that no hero or heroine or force of arms can really stand against, the shadow tech goddess is quite invincible. It really wouldn't have been a battle at all. He would have been swept away by shadow tech. End of story, roll credits, done. But that's not what we get. Instead, we see a redemption, that there's maybe a happy ending to this story, that the destroyer of worlds didn't have to be. And instead, we see Morgan Jeterix is the Tempest Findal, the scary creature we've been hearing about, we've gotten glimpses of, who can create this wall of fear. I hadn't intended Morgan Jeterix to be some sort of plain walking vampire. When I first created her in book 6, actually book 7, Against the Juries, she was just Morgan Jeterix. I guess you could say she was my first openly bi character, a free spirit. You know, she's capable of loving anybody, male or female, it doesn't really matter. And she had a thing for Paymaster Stenstrom, but I got really bored with her as a character. It's like, what? Okay, she's interesting and she's a free spirit and whatever, but what else is there to this character? And then I got the idea of the Tempest Findal, this plain walking monster that's drawn to its opposite. The Tempest Findal is the one and only. Morgan's family suffered through this horrific fire when she was a girl, a fire she barely escaped. But all the other instances throughout the universes of Morgan Jeterix did not escape from this fire. It was a Findal march. It was this moment where she became the only instance of herself in all of the planes. She's the only one that lived, and that turned her into the Tempest Findal. Unaware of what's really happening to her, she went nuts, and she became aware of a person who she was drawn to, and she didn't really know why. She calls this person her bouquet of flowers, and she longed to hold these flowers. And so she broke out of the convent and started walking the plains to get to this person, and worked her way into this person's life, killed whoever she needed. She found that her civility and her various morals and scruples were no longer relevant necessarily. She became a very dangerous creature, especially to the person that she's after. Once she gets them, she drains them of their power and they fade out of existence. Or in Captain Duvall's case, become a Kadar Gogol, a person that the universe has turned its back on. And this creature is hard to fathom because she is fully aware of what she's doing. And so sometimes, though, she'll she'll go to sleep and forget she's an immortal thing, that she'll believe that she's just a mortal person again and forget all about walking the plains and searching for her bouquet of flowers. But it doesn't last. She always wakes up and she always begins to hunt again. And so she began hunting Paymaster Stenstrom. Is she telling him the truth? Is she lying? Like he said, it's irrelevant. Since he's aware of her status, anything she says doesn't really matter. But he believes that he can help her, that he can create a special place, maybe a pocket plane or some other universe, where she can have another version of him or whoever she wants. That there could be redemption for the Tempest Vindal too. We'll see if that happens. I personally like this resolution a lot better than just having a standard old confrontation and fight scene. I just think it's much more fulfilling. Whether you agree or not, I don't know. Smash the dislike button if need be. But we're not quite done. We are not done. We still have 2 chapters to go. Actually, 1 chapter to go. Part 3, Chapter 7, Escorting the Gentleman, where we put a little bow on this story. And then after that is a short little epilogue, which should tie up all the loose ends. And if you're paying attention, there should be a lot of loose ends that to consider. What happened to the woman with the gun? What happened at the very beginning of the story? What relevance does that have to the rest of the book? You really can't put something in a story and not have it contribute in some way, shape, or form. So the all the stuff at the beginning, all the prologues and stuff, those weren't in there just for grins, just for me to exercise my creative chops. They were there for a reason. And we'll see how they tie together here at the end of the story. So next week, Part 3, Chapter 7, Escorting the Gentleman, the last chapter, and then a short epilogue, and we are done. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.